Crypto is starting to turn red on the lower time frames, and this is something that I would utilize as an opportunity. We might have that deeper pullback on Bitcoin. I'll go over it in this video. I've been talking about it for a week or so now. But overall, nothing too crazy in terms of the drops across the board. Some altcoins are dropping a little bit harder than others, like CFX, for an example, but that's because it ran 100+% in just like one day. But overall, we are still seeing some nice green on the daily. For an example, Ondo is still up about 3.7%. We have Litecoin 3.5%, ENS 6.4%. Some, meme coins are up in a big way too. But, overall, the market's not too bad. Bitcoin's still hovering around 120K. Ethereum still hovering around 3,700. XRP did have a nice strong daily close. We'll talk about that. But overall, the market is still looking pretty good. Most of these altcoins are just hovering around their higher time frame resistance, which is why I said, we might have, a little bit more of a pullback to go through, but it's going to be shallow. And all of these, pullbacks that we do see going forward will be shallow pullbacks as well. And I want you guys to realize that. But if we look at the market cap of crypto, we're still hovering around that $4 trillion level. Altcoin season still over 50 plus, which means that altcoins are starting to gain momentum against Bitcoin. Fear and greed sitting around 70 or so. The Bitcoin dominance percentage is still around 60, almost 61%. And this is at a time where, we are starting to see altcoins really, wake up in a, in a big way. But, I still think that we need to focus on the big picture here, which is, of course, Ethereum. I think Ethereum needs to be focused on. The strength of Ethereum is extremely significant, and I actually talked about this quite a bit in a live stream recently, because what I was looking at was the trading volume on the 7-day and on the 30-day. Because if we actually look at this, and let me move this up here real quick, 1 second. So if we look at the trading volume on the 7-day and also on the 30-day, Ethereum is getting close to Bitcoin. I mean, it's about half of the Bitcoin trading volume. And when we think about the market cap for Ethereum, I mean, it's significantly lower than Bitcoin, but the trading volume is almost mirroring it. And this is telling us that there's a lot of demand for Ethereum right now. We need to be focused on this, and we need to be aware of this, because this will tell us when we are about to witness that phase 2 really kick into overdrive. I still believe that we are essentially in the beginning phases of that phase 2. And the reason why I say that is because of how much Ethereum has been outperforming Bitcoin on the 7-day, and also how much focus there has been on Ethereum on mainstream media. Now, today was also a pretty big day, because what we saw was the M2 supply release. Now, we do know that there's an FOMC meeting coming up on the 29th and the 30th, so next week. We definitely need to prepare for this, because volatility will kick in next week. So we will see some, major wicks to the upside and even the downside. But, overall, this meeting, I'm not expecting too much out of, unless we see like some crazy news that, we get a rate cut. Because again, rate cuts right now, the percentage that people think is like a 5% chance in the month of July. I think September is the key month to actually focus on when it comes to rate cut decisions. But overall, we still need to prepare for an FOMC meeting day, because leading into it and even after it, we see volatility. But the main thing that I was actually looking at with the Fed was the M2 release, which we did get the M2 release today, July 22nd. And we could actually see that this increased, not a crazy amount, but we still saw another, release where we see an upward push on the M2 supply, which means that we are constantly seeing liquidity, increase. From January to now, we've seen a massive amount of money released, actually over $500+ billion already, which means they have printed $500 billion already this year. And this is what the M2 supply looks like. This was the original, gain that we were going off of for the month of May into June. And we were at about 21.94 trillion. This was an upside of 390.14 billion. And if we actually go to where we are at now, it's like $470 billion that has been released this year. So this is increasing liquidity in markets, which is why we are starting to see, a big swing across the board for traditional markets, even crypto. And talking more so about traditional markets, the S&P continues to make new all-time highs. This is what the daily looks like. We just made a new all-time high on Monday. Right now we're just kind of, chucking along, nothing too crazy. It's pretty boring price action until we see an impulsive move. And those impulsive moves, they usually happen over the course of a week. Like, for example, here's a great, push in September. Here's October as well. And then here we have November, where it was a huge step to the upside. That's exactly what we want to see over here. We want to see a major impulsive move here because the price action has been pretty boring for the most part. But I still believe that 69.60 is our target on the upside. And of course, liquidity has been allowing these markets to really kind of push higher. And I did say this even back in June as well. I said that the Fed is injecting liquidity silently and everyone is celebrating. And that's because of this. We have the Fed is now providing Wall Street with liquidity through 3 different facilities: the discount window, regular asset purchases, and even overnight repo. And here we actually can see every single one of them increasing significantly around like the May into June timeframe. So when we think about this, right, think about where Bitcoin was at in May, right? Even if we go back to Bitcoin, everyone was kind of concerned or worried about, Bitcoin, back here. But if we look at April into May, we pumped significantly. In fact, we made a new all-time high in the month of May, and everyone was wondering why. Well, think about when this liquidity actually started to hit the market. This started in the month of May. Some of this actually started in April. And even when we think about the M2 supply, right, we had a massive jump from March into April and then April into May. April into May wasn't that crazy, but we already witnessed the liquidity hit the market. And of course, stocks also jumped big from roughly April, the bottom of April, all the way into May. And then of course in the middle of May we just went crazy. We went from like 5,700 to almost 6,000. So that's because the Fed started to inject liquidity, and it's happening even right now. And this is at a time where we are starting to see retail come back. We have here bullish. Google searches for altcoins just hit their highest level since 2021. Yeah, we're now starting to see the Google searches going crazy, which means retail is starting to come back. Retail is starting to search. They're starting to look into altcoins. They're starting to look into crypto. They want to know what they can buy, what they should buy, what is going to happen next. This is when we start to get a little bit more cautious, okay? And what I mean by that is we don't want to round trip everything, right? Taking our initial investment out, taking some profits is not a bad thing. We should always hold on to assets because we are headed into inflationary, times anyways. We're never going to get away from inflation. But, paying ourselves, making sure that we could pay off debt and things like that, it's always a huge, move. So, definitely just be cautious when retail starts to flood back in like this. But also, this is all happening at a time where we have the current situation looking like this. Bitcoin is trading above 120K for the first time in history. Gold prices are surging above 3,400 per ounce and 3% away from a record high. Ethereum is set to cross above $4,000 for the first time since December of 2024. Ripple is trading above $3.50 for the first time in history, aka XRP. The 10-year note yield is set to break above 4.5%, even as Trump calls for a 300 BPS rate cut. Silver prices are trading at their highest level since 2011. The deficit spending crisis is much worse than you think. And of course, when we think about this, right, all of this is bullish for crypto. Even the deficit spending itself and the crisis around it is bullish for assets in crypto. Because when we think about what's really going on here, assets like gold and silver and crypto and even stocks will continue to soar even higher and higher and higher going forward. The best thing that you could actually hold during times like this is actually technically gold and silver, but crypto is also a great mix in there. Diversify your, holdings outside of even crypto and you'll be solid. And I've always said that silver will outperform gold. I've always mentioned it many times over. So, although gold is going crazy, we should be definitely focused on silver as well because silver has been going insane. And I've been talking about silver since roughly like 2021, 2022. Outside of that though, Bitcoin we still need to be cautious while we are under resistance on Bitcoin. We definitely are under that, 120K resistance on Bitcoin. This could still have us trading within the mid or lower 110K region at like 112, 115. If we can get a 3-day candle close over 119.9K, that would be huge, right? And I want to see that. I actually want to avoid any more pullbacks here until the next big impulsive move. But we just need to be cautious while we are fighting resistance. Every single time that we've fought resistance in the past and started to make, lower highs, we've started to see deeper sell-offs. For an example, here's resistance back in May. Boom, sell-off. We tapped the trend line. We continued to try to break out of that trend line. And then we just chopped for like a whole month into, of course, the end of June where we started to break out. And then July was huge with that massive impulsive move to the upside. So now we're just kind of trading in this boring price action range. And we're waiting for the next big impulsive move to the upside or a possible pullback before that impulsive move. So just be cautious here, especially considering the fact that Bitcoin dominance looks like it's starting to kind of find a floor here. I would love to see us, continue to sell off here on Bitcoin dominance, but, it's questionable on what's going to happen here because we just hit the first area of demand on this chart, which is like right around this range. So, so far we've lost the trend. It looks great on the higher time frames, but on the lower time frames, we could start to actually build a floor here and possibly have a dead cat bounce on Bitcoin dominance again, which definitely could hurt altcoins if we see that deeper pullback. Now, the chart that I've actually been watching the most is Bitcoin dominance with Ethereum dominance because it's not just about Bitcoin, right? It's also about Ethereum because these two are the largest cryptocurrencies. And if we want to see, XRP and XLM and HBAR and SUI and all of our other altcoins going crazy, well, guess what? We want to see dominance usurped from both of these. And although we are starting to see that nice drop to the downside, we witnessed this back in November too. And guess what? We weren't in alt season during that time. In fact, we didn't even get alt season during that time. Some altcoins went crazy, but we didn't really see dominance usurped from these two big giants in this space. So we wanted to actually see a loss of this lower trend line. And we want to take out some of these major wicks here. So the first major wick that we're actually looking at once we lose this trend line is the first one at 68.38%. After that, we want to see a loss of 67.24%, and that would create a macro lower low. This would be a major bullish signal for altcoins and a bearish signal for Bitcoin and Ethereum dominance. So that's when we really will start to see alt season. And the big focus is getting back down to these levels over here, where we would be trading in like the mid to low 60% region. And that should be where we start to see altcoins actually kind of top out and the end of alt season happen. Obviously, we keep a close eye on this throughout the entire cycle. That way we could determine exactly when we should de-risk or, take some heavy profits or so. But outside of that, XRP still looks pretty good here. HBAR looks very good. XLM and even SUI look good. And just to kind of go over these, 4 charts, XRP on the daily just had one of the strongest daily candle closes in history. So when we think about this, XRP is extremely bullish. On the 3-day, we're starting to have this nice push above this major resistance. We are still 21 hours away from having this 3-day candle close. If we could finally get this close, it would put us on a path to retesting like $4 or so. And when I say retesting, I'm mainly going off of that like $3.84 price target that they have on CMC. Yes, we know that it's not a real price target because nobody was able to buy and sell or trade at that, but it's still something to kind of go off of. So, after we break over this on the 3-day, we get that confirmation. We will definitely break out on XRP, and then we will go to almost $4. And then if we can get into price discovery, then XRP is going to go on a major tear. So XRP right now still looks pretty good. Watch for the close. We still could, retest the deep red zone here, somewhere around like $3.03, so about like $3.34. So just be cautious with that. But outside of that, HBAR also in the red zone right now. This is higher time frame resistance. Although, we're still looking pretty good here, there is still a possibility that we do retest the original high from May down here at about roughly like 23 cents before the next impulsive move on HBAR as well. This would align with Bitcoin possibly having that rejection from resistance. I just want you guys to be cautious here. But also with XLM, XLM is in a very similar, position where we're at higher time frame resistance. But it's also in a similar position as like XRP, for an example, where, you know, we're on the weekly here, but if we go to like the 3-day, we want to get a break over and a daily or a 3-day candle close, sorry, over like 50 cents. If we could do that, that would have XLM trading significantly higher. And we could actually just clean up this chart a little bit, just so that you guys can see. So the new resistance spot is right around this price target here, or sorry, I don't know why that reset, but this price target here, like around like 50 cents. Once we can clear this whole red zone, then XLM is going to go on a major move to the upside as well, just to kind of rally against or even, you know, buy XRP as well. So we'll start to see XLM mirror XRP in a big way. It already started to in a bit, but we have yet to actually get over those 2024 highs. And then we want to break over that all-time high region, which is like anywhere between 80 cents to almost like 94 cents. The big target to break over is like 94 cents on XLM to create a new high, all-time high, and go into price discovery. Outside of XLM though, SUI still looking pretty good here. We are on the higher time frame resistance. I would not mind seeing a possible retest of the trend line that I broke out of, and then we clear that red zone. And then up here, we would have that retest of the major resistance, the high from May as well, just like HBAR. And then we would have that big breakout. So overall, you know, we might get a shallow pullback here, nothing too crazy. It will be short-lived. And then after that, we start the next big wave to the upside across the board. So I'm still pretty bullish here going forward. Just be cautious of the resistance on Bitcoin, especially with, you know, dominance still being as high as it is. And yeah, I'm very excited for what's to come. I still think that leading into September is going to be very bullish. I think September we get rate cuts, causes the markets to surge even higher, and that should lead us into the top for this cycle. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because I'm free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.